Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. How do you keep going after years of infertility, after failed treatments, after multiple miscarriages, and when the path to parenthood looks nothing like you originally imagined? My guest today is Constance Lewis. She's a women's health nurse practitioner, certified fertility coach, and a mom whose own 6-year infertility journey included low AMH, endometriosis, failed fertility treatment, multiple losses, and the unexpected discovery of a balanced translocation that made pregnancy on her own incredibly unlikely. We also talk about the emotional realities of infertility, the decision to pursue donor eggs, and how Constance's experiences eventually shaped the work she now does to support other women who are navigating infertility and loss. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Constance. Constance, do you mind telling us a little about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name is Constance. I am a women's health nurse practitioner, fertility coach, pediatric sleep coach, and children's book author with 3 kids of my own.
Very
And
busy.
yes, that's a lot of busyness. It's very hard balancing life and work and all of those things, like every other mother in the United States, I think, today. But
Yeah,
yeah,
so
I was a NICU nurse before that and childbirth educator and lactation, and I just found my way into women's health and fertility, and that was my passion for a very long time and still is.
so it sounds like you kind of have experience with a lot of different aspects involved in women's health. So what
Absolutely.
kind of made you want to focus specifically on women's health itself?
I think it was just a feeling of that was the next right thing. Being in the NICU was, and wanting to be a nurse from the beginning was always the goal. And then obviously I loved the neonatal intensive care unit, taking care of the babies, and I needed to have a more stable schedule for a family life. And so I realized becoming a nurse practitioner gave me that. And although I could have gone down the nurse practitioner NICU way, something told me that wasn't the right way for me, that I needed to go women's health. And so I just listened to my intuition and I went for it. And I was doing that for 8 years before I stepped away from the bedside.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, or I know a lot of us, like, we don't want to listen to what our intuition says, and we're like, no, I
Hmm.
think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But when we actually stop and truly listen, like, it usually ends up being the right thing for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I preach that constantly to anyone I meet is, what does your intuition say?
Sometimes we're not good at listening.
I've not always been good at listening. It's hard to quiet the noise of the outside world and go in. I feel like it's actually a skill to learn and to master.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it like that, but it really is. I mean,
Mhm.
it's not something that we're just born with or that we just know how to do. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
our ancestors knew how to do it, but we
Hmm.
don't know how anymore.
Yeah, I think we're born having intuition. We just don't listen because I think again, there's just so much going on in our brains and our logical sense, and we're not allowing the feelings of what's right to come in.
So, do you mind talking a little bit about the infertility journey that you went through?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a 6-year journey, and there was lots of ups and downs, as most fertility journeys are. I had it all planned out in my head as a type A, controlling, perfectionist woman that I was. And in my head, it went to school, get married. He finished his residency, and then, get stable and have a house and do all these things and then get pregnant. That was take the IUD out, get pregnant. Those were my steps, right? And so once all those other steps happened, and I was 29 years old, and the IUD came out, and I was expecting that first month I was going to be pregnant, and naive and just, everything else, that didn't happen. And then so forth, and each month there was another negative test, and it was just finally about 2 year. It was about a year into the trying journey where I went to a doctor and I said, "Can you, just draw my labs? What's happening? I have normal periods. I don't have any crazy pain. What's going on?" I mean, I had painful periods growing up, extremely painful periods growing up, and I was on birth control for a long time because of that. And that would have gave sense to what maybe was going on. And I had severe migraines during my periods, which is also another clue. and to my fertility. And I got my AMH back, and it was at 30 years old, it was 0.13. It was very low and it didn't look good. And so we kind of decided, well, let's try the histosalpingogram and all of that anyway. And going into the histosalpingogram, unfortunately, the radiologist couldn't even pass the catheter. He couldn't even get it in. It was painful. And there was tears and it was not good. And so we went back to the doctor, and I'm like, I've had pain with urinating. I've had pain with going to the bathroom. Couldn't get the catheter in, and therefore led to laparoscopy, and therefore led to the diagnosis of endometriosis, stage 2. And that led me to multiple IUIs that didn't work. And that led me to IVF, where we tried 3 rounds and with 2 miscarriages. And that led me to finding out my husband had something called a balanced translocation, which is basically where his DNA are balanced, but 2 of them switched places. So his offspring are 75% chance unlikelihood of even surviving. So you had my low AMH and my husband's balanced translocation, and we were basically told we were struck by lightning, and there was basically a 0 to 1% chance of getting pregnant ever. So that was a big pill to swallow, and we decided to move on to donor embryo because I knew, again, intuition, that I was meant to carry a baby. I knew that I was meant to have a baby carried by me. And in my heart, I came to the conclusion as I didn't care how that looked genetically. And so we chose a donor, and that's a whole nother story because one didn't work and she was infertile, and then we chose another one. It was like a whole story. But we got one healthy embryo from that one donor, and we put that in, and I got pregnant with Miles, my 8-year-old son. And then I wanted to have more kids, but I didn't have any eggs left. So we tried to get that donor, and she couldn't do it anymore. And so we had to go searching again. And then we found another one, and hence how I have 2 more children. And I have 3 children now. And so that's really the long version of my story. Actually, it could go much longer, but that's the middle version of my story.
Sometimes when you go through like the journey that's that long, it's really hard to sum it up because, it
Yeah.
took this long period of your life and, trying to sum it up in like a short summary is hard.
It is, and there's so much more detail to it that really involved the emotions and things that happened through the medical system that weren't good. And I actually have a chapter in a book about my entire story if you're interested in it. It's Infertility, Success to Stories of Help and Hope for your journey. But basically, it's a story of a bunch of women. Actually, each chapter is about different women and their journeys, and my whole journey is in there. I wrote in that book. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, I'll have to check that out.
yeah, it's written by Erica Hoke is actually who started this, one of my friends. And so she got all the authors together. Now she has 4 books out, actually. 3 about infertility, and then there's one about postpartum mess. And I'm in the postpartum mess one too. Because we all know, or if you don't know, you have such a more high likelihood of having some sort of postpartum anxiety or depression if you go through infertility. So
I was
it's
not aware of that because we did go
Mhm.
through infertility. We never did IVF, but we did other fertility treatment. And I mean, I already suffer from anxiety, but I definitely had
Mhm.
postpartum anxiety that I was diagnosed with after my last one. And I didn't,
Mhm.
yeah, I didn't realize that those could be correlated.
Yes, and even being a women's health nurse practitioner, I wasn't aware of that either. And I couldn't, I had severe postpartum anxiety with my first, and I didn't know that's what I had. I couldn't pinpoint it in myself, even though I diagnose it daily. So that was interesting to go through. And I was like, oh, I get it now. Like, I get what these women are going through because I would treat them, but I didn't understand. So that added a whole nother layer to my ability to be empathetic for others in that situation.
I find it frustrating how we don't learn about these things when we're, going through, I mean, even when
Mhm.
we're like trying to get pregnant, when we're going through pregnancy. I mean, when you go back after having your baby or after having your loss, either one,
Mhm.
you just fill out that, was it like 5 question, like, are you depressed? Are you sad? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
like, how does
Mhm.
this, but it doesn't tell you anything about other things to look out for.
Yeah. And also, I think that the the risk of you having postpartum depression and anxiety after having loss is even significantly elevated as well because with my 2 losses, one I had to have a DNC for as well. because of how far along I was and there was no heartbeat, it's like that anticipation that something's always going to go wrong. So even when I was pregnant with my actually stayed pregnant with my son who's 8 now, I didn't connect with the pregnancy. I wouldn't allow myself to enjoy or to even think that I was pregnant because of that fear and how you protect yourself. And I feel like it didn't feel even real to me, even when he was born. And then I went into the anxiety. It didn't feel real that I had a baby until I seeked out treatment for my anxiety, cognitive behavior, and those kind of things. And I was like, oh, I am a mother to this baby. It was like a whole thing, especially after the loss.
Yeah, that's really hard. I mean, I had trouble because I also went through pregnancy after loss, and it is really hard to
Mhm.
bond with the baby sometimes, and you feel kind of guilty about it,
So
but
guilty.
it's you, I think, trying to protect yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
And
it's trying to protect yourself from not going down into that hole of that anxiety even more.
which, yeah, I mean, for us who are already prone to anxiety, that just adds even more.
Yes, exactly. Hmm.
So did you, like when you were presented options after being you diagnosed, your husband diagnosed, do you feel like your options were clearly laid out? Like, do you feel like you were informed or was that process?
So I feel that I had to actively seek out the exact clinic that I wanted to work with after when we first initially tried IUI just at our regular OBGYN's office, because they're not a fertility clinic, but they can do IUIs. Then we seeked out infertility specialists in the area, and it was frustrating at times because trying it's like you're learning it all on your own, trying to get out this information, and they do their best to educate you. And there's some fertility clinics that are better than others, and that's why we actually switched over to a different one after my 2 miscarriages because of the lack of information and the lack of support. So it's hard. I think that any medical care is difficult to navigate, even as a healthcare provider with yourself or your children or whoever your parents, because there's not that education that takes place. There's not that, okay, here's your options. These are the percentages. What can you do instead? It's just like, this is what I was taught in school. This is how you should do it. And this is how it's going to work. And do you know the fourth leading cause of death in the United States is medical errors? And I truly believe that if people would advocate more for themselves and not necessarily maliciously, but just in intuition and passion, that number would go down. And especially in infertility, especially in pregnancy with loss, because there's a reason. And sometimes you're told, oh, you have unexplained pregnancy losses and we don't know why, or unexplained infertility. And to me, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in unexplained anything. There's always an underlying reason. It may not be physical, but what is it?
Yeah, no, I hate that. I feel like people just use that when they're like, well, I don't want to try anything else, or I've tried the things that people normally try, so I'm not going to look further, like
Hmm.
go somewhere else. It's
Yeah.
kind of like you being written off, really.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So I know also that you said that you ended up with the donor eggs.
Mhm.
Was that a hard decision for you to make to know that it wasn't like genetically your baby?
Yeah, great question. It was in the beginning. It was another stab in the heart. It was like another letdown, another loss, actually, I would say, because I remember even having that conversation with my dad. He says, and with men, it's like they want their legacy to live on and their name and their genes and their physicality. That's just how it is. And I have a brother who's doing that, but the fact of like, okay, so in my mind in the beginning, I thought, well, this child isn't going to have any part of me genetically, but just my husband and some other woman, right? And that's hard to digest. That pill's hard to digest. But we had to actually meet with a therapist before we chose donor egg, which actually I thought was very genius of the fertility clinic that we worked with, because that helped a little bit, because she said that this is biologically your child, not genetically, but it's biologically your child. And actually, when you carry a child, epigenetics is, and now we're finding in research, is really big. So although genetically when that embryo is first put in you, but as the fetus starts to grow, you actually intertwine their DNA with your DNA. So actually your baby is genetically yours to some extent because of that epigenetics, and it is biologically mine. So that word, how she used that word, helped me switch my mindset because I didn't know, but I still love this baby just as much. If I looked at this, so what went through my head is if I look at this child as it gets older and somebody says, "Oh my gosh, he looks just like you," am I gonna like break down in tears and freak out over it? And I'll be honest, there were some times when people say that there's a little bit of a twinge still, but in my mind, I'm like, he is all mine. And I
Mhm.
have talked to a lot of women who adopted as well, and they have told me that their souls feel so intertwined with their adopted baby child that they feel like that is their child no matter what the genetics is. And that's a beautiful thing. But it is hard to get past. There was a lot of self-reflection to get through it.
I do love that they made you do the counseling, though. I think that's good for I mean, I think that should be required for anybody going through like fertility treatments or
Yes,
loss or, any of that. I mean, it's so important
absolutely.
and something that so many people don't do.
Yeah, I think the idea behind therapy is scary, or just like, oh, I don't need therapy. But in honesty, I think everybody in the world needs it. It's actually so refreshing when you find somebody that understands you and can walk you through things that you overthink in life.
Yeah, my mom, she's actually a counselor, so I've kind of grown up with, therapy-ish in my life. And so it's
Yeah,
always been, something that felt positively about, but I know that that's not the way everybody views it.
correct. Yeah.
And so I know you also have a child who also received a medical diagnosis. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my first child, who we call Miracle Miles, before we called him Miracle Miles before we even had this diagnosis, because he was that one embryo that we got the very first time around, and we put him in and he's stuck and he's just so strong. And he was a healthy boy all, his whole life, very smart, very intelligent, sweet, kind, happy, laid back child. And at the age of 4, he started having seizures out of nowhere. And then he was diagnosed with epilepsy. And that was 2 years of me also being high advocate for him and his medical care and finding the right doctors and finding the reason and just not stopping. Because again, he kept getting medically diagnosed incorrectly, and nobody found the lesion on his brain for a whole year. And it was just this whole push of there's something else, and listening to my intuition. They found the lesion and they realized, and they gave us a really good percentage. And so he ended up having brain surgery to remove the lesion the day after his kindergarten graduation, which was wild. Yes. And so not only did you go, I went through the fertility, the loss of my eggs, the loss of those 2 babies I miscarried, and then now I'm going through this. Is there possibly a loss of my child, my Miracle Miles, because I was told by the doctors, we can't keep going like this or he'll die. He will die. And so it was just impacted by all of this loss in my life. And I'm happy to say that post brain surgery, he has been seizure free, knock on wood, and he's off medications and he's been seizure free for 6 months. So just that just tells you that he's the most resilient little boy in the world to make it this far from that little embryo that could to surviving brain surgery and just being who he is, and that anything can happen to you, but if you just keep advocating, you just keep listening to your intuition, it will lead you in the right direction.
And I feel like nobody should come between a mom trying to advocate for their kid. Like we can be
Mhm.
fierce for our kids, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. That was so funny. I just went to his neurology doctor's appointment this past Monday, and they're like, "Here comes Constance." They know me because they know, like, I will tell you what I think, or I ask you all the questions. I want to know the percentages. I want to know. I will go find another doctor if I need to, and not that I don't trust the medical system. I do. I am a medical provider, but I think that parents' intuitions are just so strong, right? And you can find the answers. You don't have to have all the answers, but you can find the people that have the answers. And And I'm always advocating for other people. I always have, because of Miles's book and what I've gone through, I have people reaching out to me saying, "What doctor should I go to? I need help. My kid's having seizures and nobody's helping." And this, and then I call up my doctor and I'm like, "Hey, I have another one for you," but he's seen somebody and he's like, "I send him over, Constance." So I'm always trying to help other people find those people.
I feel like that would be healing, though, to be able to turn around and use your experience to help other
It
people. Do
is.
you find that that helps you?
Yeah, everything that I've done up into my life to this point has been unintentionally healing, I think. Writing the book with this fertility book was unintentionally healing. I was like, wow, like that felt good, right? The postpartum book was the same way. Miles' children's book about his what he went through and how we did that with it, all of this and helping other parents, moms, children has been that part. It's just been such a healing process.
Do you want to talk a little about the book that you wrote about him?
Yeah, sure. I have it back here too. I always have it. This is Miles's book, Miles and the Colorful Capes of Feelings. It is, oh my gosh, written from a place of love. And so when he was going through all of his seizures, it was hard. We had a lot of doctor's appointments. He had to get, a lot of testing done, and we had to go to the hospital a lot and go to the doctors a lot. And when you do that as a child, it kind of takes the joy out of life. Children are meant to be joyful and fun and playful and live that kind of life, and you want to preserve that innocence as long as possible. And when you have to grow up faster than you're supposed to by having brain surgery or getting stuck with needles or doing other things, it can be hard. And so I've always been trying to figure out ways to help him stay in that kid-like state even through these difficult procedures. And he loved so much dressing up as a superhero. That was his jam. And he doesn't do it as much now because he's like, "I'm 8, mom. I'm getting too big for that." Even though
Oh,
his little brother, the 2-year-old, brings it out of him and he'll get him to put on his costume sometimes and run around. It's really cute. But I'm like, "Can you still do that?" But that's what we did. We said, "Let's put on your superhero costume when we go to the hospital. Let's bring your he was obsessed with Spider-Man. So I'm like, "Let's bring your Spider-Man. Let's put on your cape. Like, let's do things to help you feel more brave when we get to these things, and to help you get through it and afterwards as well." And he would always pick the superhero toy at the hospital once he finished his procedure. And we're always into color and talking about how we're feeling in our colors that day. Like, so for, I always said to him, "Okay, what color does sad feel like to you?" And he'll say, "Oh, blue," which makes sense because most people say that. And of course they watch Inside Out too, so that's
oh
probably a
yeah.
thing. And then what color is, mad, red, but what color is brave to you? Teal. He picked all these colors and these capes that are in the book. So we essentially just took a emotion and we paired it with a colored cape. And then he went in this book, he decided to give his capes to other friends when they were going through something and he wanted them to express their feelings, but they couldn't necessarily use words to do that. Because again, I feel like it takes a lot of work learning how to verbalize your words or your feelings with words. Even adults can't do that. Your husband will walk in mad and he can't just say, "I'm really mad right now. Okay. I'm in the red zone." He'll just like whatever. And you're like, "What happened?" Even adults can't even express themselves with their feelings through words sometimes, right? So we thought if we could give them a way or other kids a way to use color to show us how they're feeling, they don't necessarily have to use words. They can just put on something that they're feeling. And it doesn't have to be the colors that Miles chose in the book. It could just be any color. You could say, "Oh, does that color make you feel?" Or "How are you?" Or you can just start, you teach ahead of time. And we also do a lot of emotion release with coloring, painting, creation, angry chalk or happy coloring. We do a lot of tools like that with our kids.
That's so interesting. I haven't really heard of, tying the colors to the emotions. I mean, beyond like you said, Inside Out or things like that. But I really
Hmm.
love that idea because, how could a 5-year-old, 6-year-old possibly express how they feel about something like brain surgery?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. I mean,
yeah,
how
that's not
I could
something.
barely process that in my own mind, that my child was having that.
Does he like the book then?
He loves it. Yeah, he's very proud. He's a very shy in a way. Like he doesn't like all of the attention. And people are like he's been on the news for the book and on the radio station and he's like, I'm not into all this. He's so, he's not in. My daughter, on the other hand, her book just came out actually in February and she's all into that. She wants all the attention. So it's so two different spectrums, but he's very proud. He feels the empathy behind the book, but when he explains it and he say, I'm just here to help other kids, talk about their feelings is what he says. It's just so nonchalant and it cracks me up. That's just like, yeah, it's just nonchalant to him. This is just what he does.
I love that.
Mhm.
He sounds like a very sweet kid.
He is. He's a very cool kid. Yeah, for sure.
So, if you were going to give any advice to someone who's going through, I mean, their infertility journey or
Mhm.
a medically tough diagnosis, any of these things, what would you tell them?
I would say don't give up. I know that you're going to lose hope sometimes because I did, and that's hard to bring back within yourself. But don't give up because I feel that you know what you are meant to have. You know if you are meant to be a mom, if you are meant to carry, or even if you say to yourself, I don't think I'm meant to carry a baby, but I know I'm meant to be a mom. Like if I know I'm meant to be a mom, it may not look exactly like you thought it was going to look like, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And so by you not giving up and fighting for yourself and your belief, that is the one advice I could give any mom is just don't give up and reach out for answers, ask people, continue to fight the fight and keep going. Even on the hard days, sometimes you need a break. I get that. There's days where I just was like, I'm giving up. I'm not doing this anymore. But then I jump right back in a month later. And I understand that. That is. But I feel like if you know in your heart you're meant to be a mom, then you are. And it doesn't, yes, you might grieve the loss of what that might have looked like. But if you're meant to be a mom, you are.
I love that advice. And I think kind of expanding on that, we are kind of taught that there's only one way to be a mom.
Yep.
Like you and your
Yeah.
husband get
Yeah.
married, have a baby, but there's
Yep.
so many other ways to be a mom and none are less valid than the other.
Yeah, exactly. And I truly believe that there's so many souls out there that, need parents in other ways. And say, for instance, if you aren't able to have a kid, but you're able to foster to adopt or to adopt, you're saving that child's life. And that's a soul that you've connected with and brought into your family. And, it just that beautiful connection alone calls you mom. That you are a mom. Even if it wasn't the exact way you thought it was, you are a mom.
And I feel like you were talking about earlier with people who have adopted that, they feel like their souls are intertwined. I mean, that is your child. It's,
Yep.
a lot of people just throw around things like adoption and IVF like so freely, like, oh, why don't you just do
Mhm.
this? Why don't you just do this without really understanding all that really goes into it and is behind it.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's not only financially a process, even adoption, but it's physically, mentally, emotionally a process. And it's in each layer you have to peel off the layer of that onion as a woman because it's like, okay, I'm emotionally going to deal with this. Okay, now I physically have to deal with it, whether that's infertility and giving yourself shots or even adoption and having to, figure out what you're doing physically with your body to connect with this child, right? And then you have to peel the layer back of emotions. And then you have to peel the layer back of mental health and how this is going to affect you mentally. And then the other layer is relationship layer, which is huge with your partner because infertility can really mess with that relationship layer. So you're peeling away that too. And so that takes time and you can't heal and accept all of those things at once. So you have to give yourself grace and work on one at a time and move to the next when you're ready.
Yeah, that's so true. It's not just okay, I'm going to make this decision and then, okay, we're
Mhm.
good. Like, let's move forward. It
Yes.
doesn't. Yeah. I'm
Mhm.
curious, did you and your husband have the same like feelings about the way you were moving forward, or did you clash at all on that?
So I think we both knew we wanted kids. We thought we were going to have 4 kids and that was going to be it and we're going to have a big old family and then, that didn't work out and we ended up on having 3 and but we always knew we were meant to be parents and no matter how that looked to us it was going to happen and he was extremely supportive of that situation And he was even supportive, obviously, of the adoption and whatever we had to do to have a baby. But I will tell you that in the beginning of our fertility journey, he didn't always know the right things to say. And I don't think that's his fault necessarily. That was just my expectation of what he
Mhm.
should say to me because I'm going through this, right? And he is too. But when you're so involved and inundated with yourself and your own feelings, it's like you don't see that that person is also going through it. And so I think that there has to be some sort of an eye-opening experience, like, oh, okay, he's going through this too. He's grieving something as well. And if he's the one that's infertile, that could be affecting him. But I think that in the beginning, the turmoil between us was more of like, you don't know what to say to me to make me feel better. And
Yeah.
I feel like most people don't know what to say to you to make you feel better when you're going through infertility. Honestly, if you actually think about it, like out of 20 people who say something to you, maybe one gets something right where you feel like, okay, I feel better. So,
Yeah.
and we're always saying, like, don't tell me to just relax and don't tell me that in God's time and don't tell, you're always saying, don't say this to me, don't say that to me, but people have no idea what to say. And unless you've been through it, and even if you've been through it, sometimes you don't know what to say because everybody is different of what they need and at different stages of their journey, what different support they need. So I always tell my clients, because I actually am a fertility coach as well, I always say to my clients, I want you to write down how people around you can support you. What can they say to you? What can they do to make you feel better? Is it physical? Is it emotional? Like, is it words? Is it bringing you a blanket? Like, what do you need somebody to do? And it might change throughout the week, throughout the day, but I want you to write it down and just give them the list. And that way it's not like we can't read everybody's minds. And that really helped me with my husband by doing that step.
That is a really good point because you're right. We are saying all the time, "Ugh, don't say that, don't say that." But how often do we tell them what to say? And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I know we don't even know what would be helpful, but
Yeah. Yep. That's so true.
sometimes,
I mean, that's
sometimes we
true.
can at least say something that could help and give them
Yeah.
a little idea.
Yeah, I don't need you to say any words. I just need you to bring me a cup of tea and wrap me up in a blanket, And then if you don't know, meditate on it. Close your eyes. Ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? Ask your intuition what you need. It'll tell you.
So, if people were interested in working with you, where would they go to find more information about that?
Oh, yeah, I have an Instagram page. I never know the name of it. Isn't that so sad?
It's
I
hard to keep
actually
track of all of these things, okay?
too many things in my brains. I actually have three Instagram pages, which is also a very big problem, but I can't connect my children's book with my fertility with my cheap pediatric sleep because that just doesn't make sense. So I'm always like, what is my Instagram? Yeah, so for fertility, it's fertility underscore empowered underscore coaching. And then our children's book, which is the one that I showed you, Miles's book, is an Instagram. It's colorful underscore feelings dot books. So much there. But we have a website for the book as well if you are interested. And if you can't find me anywhere else, you can definitely email me on the website because at least you can get to me in any way possible. And it's
Right.
www.colorfulcapesofeelings.com.
Yeah, see, that's a lot to remember, having to remember a website, having to remember an
It's
Instagram,
too
and then,
much.
if it's different on Facebook or different over here, it's like, I don't know.
I'm really trying to simplify my life a little bit with this stuff, but it's hard. And then Mariah's book just came out, my daughter, because somebody said to me, I mean, I know your son's special and he went through this, but you have three other kids. So you can't just write a book for one kid because when they grow up, what are they going to say? Do you not care about me? You didn't write a book about me. So fun, in a funny way. So I thought, oh yeah, I guess I should write a book about my daughter. So hence we wrote a book about her and hers is colorful tutus of feelings.
Oh,
And
love
hers
that.
is yeah, hers is so girly because that's just her and that's she loves tutus and pink and frilly and dancing and gymnastics and hers is more about those kids that have really big feelings. So, that you feel like overwhelm you as a parent and that are shy and hide behind and won't say hi, but then when they get upset, it's like boom, an explosion and what to do about that. So that book is so much different than Miles's, but also good for parents as well. And for yourself, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. So I was like, that sounds like something all parents should read too, right?
Yes.
Are you going to do one for your third child then?
Yeah, we are. Yes, and I'm excited actually. I like writing books. It is Mike is the 2-year-old, so his is going to be a little like a smaller book for more little kids. And it's I haven't really thought about the theme, but I think it's going to have something to do with toys. Like because with kids who are that little, they don't necessarily know color. They don't know what color. I mean, they know what color is, but they can't name it. And so I think toys are good because if you're mad, you can bang on a drum. If you're sad, you can hug your lovey. So it's more of like a color of a object that they're going to connect to help them through that emotion.
I love that idea. Yeah, my youngest is 3, so that sounds like something she would totally resonate with. And then
Yes.
my middle daughter is all about the tutus and the pink and the, all that. So
Yeah, well, that book is for you. I'm telling you,
yeah,
it's all
I will
about
be
that.
getting it. Yes.
Oh my goodness. It cracks me up because I wasn't like that growing up. I was more tomboyish. And so, I have this daughter and I'm like, how does this happen? Because I'm not influencing this, but there's princesses and tutus and pink and purple. And I'm like, and I love it. But I'm just like, what do I do? How do I do
Right.
this? It's
You're
so
like, this
funny.
wasn't me. I wasn't
Yeah.
prepared for this.
Yeah, but they're all different. They all come out with their own personalities and their own dreams, and you just want to let them go with that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Constance, for sharing your story with us. If today's conversation resonated with you, I hope it reminded you that there's not just one path to motherhood, and that no path is less valid than any of the other paths. If you found this episode helpful, please consider sharing it with someone who might need it, or leave a review for the podcast on Apple or Spotify. It helps more people navigating infertility and loss to find these helpful conversations. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.